Okay, so I'm going to ask the table in the back corner. What are two things on your list any of the 8 of you remembered from last week? Surely among 8 brains, someone remembered something. Mitchell? I get it. All right. Yeah, it has a specific use. You're right, we do use it a lot. Right, it's the prefix for any variables. You have to use it in front of any variables. I'm just going to ask you about being loosely typed. What does that mean in a nutshell? Okay, not only do you not have to declare them, but you can't declare them. There's no such thing. If you try and create a variable and give it a data type of string, PHP compiler is going to give you an error. You cannot assign a data type. All right, table in the middle at the back. Anything else you remember from last week we should add to the list? Yep.
It doesn't show up on like when you inspect it, like it's
Okay, yep.
this sign and the question mark PHP and then the question mark.
Right. Okay.
Comments can be done
So multi-line, how would we do them? Yeah. Okay. Table in the middle. Do you have anything else on your list? Anything else? No. This table, anything else on the list we don't already have? So I'll just add here that it must be served by a web server. If you don't have a web server running, you're not going to be able to run anything with PHP. That's a pretty good list. That's most of what, pretty much all the important points. I'll save these notes in here. You'll have access to this as well during the midterm. So there may be some quiz questions that may come out of here. Okay, so our primary focus today is we want to look at how do we connect up a web application to a database using PHP and MySQL, and how do we capture data from users so we can save it. And it can be, the process is the same no matter what kind of data we're asking for and what the context of the application is. It could be a registration page where we're asking users for profile information. It could be a comment page where they can give us a block of text. It could be a purchase page where they're giving us credit card information. The process is actually the exact same every time we do this. But just before we start, I want to check everybody's access to the server because depending on whether or not our server access is working, we may have to structure this a little bit differently. Now, in my class yesterday, our FTP connections to AWS were not working, including mine. Now, a lot of the students in my class had old AWS accounts that they got last semester, and those seem to be working. but I don't know if you guys got AWS accounts last semester as well. Okay, if you did get an account last semester, I assume you probably have that connection saved in FileZilla. If not, I'll show you how to find it in your email and how to save it. If you have it saved, maybe give it a try and give me some indication whether you can connect. Actually, we probably need to, and if you can't, we may need to go through the OpenVPN first. It does work. Okay. So in that case, for now, we'll use the old ones. I didn't know that you had them, and I wasn't sure that they were still active. What about your database? If you have or you probably didn't have a database set up last semester, so you won't have tried. Okay. I'm going to try my old AWS database. If we're not able to connect to it, what we can do for today is I can set up a database that I have on another server, and I will just share the credential, and we can all use the same database, at least until we get AWS sorted out. Okay, so it looks like our old AWS database, that the one I have, is working. So you guys, you haven't probably used yours yet, but it's actually the same username and password that you have for your old FTP connection. In order to find that, if you open up your student email, you will have an email back from probably the beginning of September. I'll just search for mine. Bear with me for a second. I'll tell you what to search for so that you can find those credentials. I have a copy of the same email. Okay. The email will look like this. It'll come from root, and it'll say, "Welcome to LAMP Stack on AWS." Okay, the original one or the newer one? The newer one is the connection's not working. So I'm asking you to find the one you got at the beginning of last semester. It has the credential that you used for your FTP connections last semester. If you have any issues connecting to your own database, I will set up one that you can connect to. Remind me again who your teacher is for relational database? Mozzie, okay. Right, you had it last semester. And did you use Workbench? Does everybody have this installed already? If you don't have it installed, it was on the in the announcement I made before the start of the semester, asking you to download and install it. It will run on any operating system, doesn't matter what you're using. So if you open up MySQL Workbench, I'll go through the process of setting up this connection. So on the home screen, there's a plus sign here to add a new connection. Give it a friendly name. I'll just call it AWS Old, because we do have a new one. We don't necessarily need the new one. The host name should be simply aws.computerstudies with the domain written like this, the dot before the ES. This domain name was Ross's ingenious idea. The default port is 3306. You don't have to change it. That's the standard port for MySQL. So just leave the port as it is. Add the username. And then for the password, if you click this Store in Vault button, you put in the password and there may be a check. Actually, yeah, just put in the password here. That should store it permanently. Again, the password will be in the email right underneath your username. And your username is probably GC followed by your 9-digit Georgian student number. Again, it's the same username and password you're using in your FTP connection. So again, this email would be one that you would have gotten in September. It's not, I know you got another email last week. Those credentials aren't working right now. They were working, but they're not. Our technician's trying to sort out why it isn't. Really doesn't matter which connection you use. And after you've put in the password, you should be able to click OK, and that will add it to your list of saved connections. If anybody's not able to get connected, I've also created a database on a shared host, and I will share the credential with everybody. So if anybody needs to for now, for today, in order they can do the lesson, you can just connect to my database. I will post the credentials for this on D2L. All of the instructions for connecting to the web server and connecting to the database, they're also in weekly learning links and resources. So here's instructions on the connecting to the web server. Here's instructions for connecting to the database. So I will just add in here. Actually, I'll add it to this one on this item about instructions on connecting to the database. So if you are not able to connect to your own AWS database, you can create a connection in MySQL Workbench using these credentials instead. So you need the host name, the username, and password that I've put on D2L. You can see them here. So I'm going to add a connection to my new database here. Whoops, sorry, the host is wrong. It's MySQL 7. Sorry, I will fix that. So I'm going to add the connection in here. Again, the values are on D2L for you if you need it. It's in Weekly Learning Tools and Resources under the item that says connecting to the MySQL database. So everybody should be able to connect to either their own AWS database, or you should be able to connect to my shared database. As far as your web server, you should be able to use your old AWS connection to upload your files to a web server. So what we want to start to do is start to build our application so users can start to put data into our database. So the idea of how this works, it's actually kind of a similar process to going grocery shopping, really. When we go grocery shopping, which I need to do later today, we need to grab all the stuff we need. And typically you can see down at the bottom of this picture, when you go grocery shopping, you need something to hold all of the food you're buying. It's similar in a web application. We want to ask users for a bunch of information. The stuff doesn't come at us randomly. We need some kind of container, some kind of bucket for the user to give us all of their information. Now in the grocery store, the cart, all it can do is hold the food, right? The cart can't tell you how much your grocery bill is going to be, and it can't process your payment. It would be nice if it could, and I think there's actually a grocery store in Eastern Canada that's piloting the smart grocery cart, right? You scan as you put it in, it shows you how much your bill is as you shop, and then you swipe your card and you leave. You don't have to stand in the checkout line anymore. I don't know why someone didn't invent this a really long time ago, okay? Your HTML, the way this works in the browser is kind of the same. Our bucket that collects user information, it can collect the user information, but it can't actually process it. It can't check it for valid, it can't validate it, it can't save it to the database. So we have this container that holds all the user data, and then the processing has to happen somewhere else. So to do this, we're going to have two separate pages. One that collects data from the user, and then one that actually processes it and saves it. So the container we've got to use in a browser, we only have one option, and that is an HTML form. You guys probably worked with forms or may have worked with them a little bit last semester in your HTML class. So a form is really just a container for user inputs. It's analogous to your grocery cart, really. So anywhere we are asking users for input, if you look in the source of the page, there will be a form tag, guaranteed. There has to be. The forms themselves aren't visible though. The form is just HTML markup that says here's like where our container starts and ends for user inputs. We don't actually see anything if the only tags we put on the page are form and close form. Inside of the form tags go all of the individual inputs. And there's two attributes we're going to need in order for our forms to work. And later on when we do file uploads, there's going to be 3. Every time we build a form, we're going to specify these 2 attributes, the method and the action. So here we've used method post. There's one other, post is the most popular form method. What's our other option if we don't want to use post, Alex? Yeah, we could use post or we could use get. 99% of the forms we're going to use, or you'll see it every day as an end user, use post. Okay. Does anybody know what's the difference between using post and using get, and why is post used so much more commonly? We'll try both of them today so we can see the difference, but does anybody know? But
Post actually establishes 2 different TCP connections and is sent, the parameters are sent within the body of the request, and get parameter, get request is sent within one TCP connection and set within the get parameter.
right. So get is technically faster, but post is much more secure than get. So rarely do we use get. There's really only one context where we see forms using get on the web. We'll look at those later. And then what do you suppose this action is?
What are those next?
Yeah, the page that is basically going to receive the form submission and do all the processing. You can do it in one page. You might see some code samples where the form, there is no action. And in that case, the form submits to itself. It reloads, and the same page has to be both the form and the processing page. I find the code is really messy this way. It's cleaner to have one page as a form and a separate action page that processes the form. It's cleaner that way. And then a big part of our requirement as web developers is translating user requirements into web forms. So what information do they need from their users? And then what controls does it make sense for us to give them? Wherever we can, we want to give users lists or things they can click on. Why is that a good idea? I mean, we could build this form with every control just being a text box, but this is going to be a better user interface design. Why? That's number one. It limits what they can put in. What's the other advantage? From the end user's point of view, would you rather fill out, I think there's 8 fields here, would you rather have 8 text boxes, or would you rather have 3 text boxes and then the other fields? And why? Yeah, it's just less work. Why would I type in my department as marketing when I could just click the radio button? So wherever we can allow users to click and choose things, that makes inputting faster, more convenient for them. So that's the first end, is the form. Like our grocery cart, we're getting all the information we need from the user. The second part of it is the action page. So that's our PHP page. And this is basically what's going to happen. We're going to take all of the values that got submitted to the form. We're going to use server-side script to interpret and maybe check those values. And if they're good, we want to then connect to our database and save the information to the database so that it's stored permanently. And then later we can read it out, which is what we'll do next week. This week we'll be able to save information. Next week we'll be able to pull it out and display it. So how do we do this? On our PHP page, PHP has a series of built-in collections. There's a post collection and there's a get collection. And we'll use whichever one matches the action on our forms. Most of the time we're going to use post. So here's what the syntax is going to look like. If we have a field on our form, let's say we've got a text box called first_name. I type in my name, Rich, in that box and submit the form. We can read the value with this syntax, $_post and then square brackets and single quotes, and then this is the name of the input box from the form. And here I'm storing it in a variable. We don't have to store it in variables, but the syntax of working with the value like this is a lot simpler than working with the syntax with the brackets and quotes. We're a lot more likely to make a typo and break something here. So before we can do any of this, and the reason why I dealt with the database connection first, is we can't save any data until we have a connection to our database and we have a table in there where we can store stuff. So the database that I just made, for example, this shared one, there's nothing in there yet. In your AWS databases, you may not have any tables. So we're going to have to build a table first before we can actually put any information into it. The tables don't get created on the fly. You got to build the structure first before you can put anything in there. Okay. So go back to your, going to go back to my lesson 2 folder. There's a quick exercise for us to do here. In the middle of lesson 2, there's this Word document called connection exercise. So open up a copy of this file. This shouldn't take very long. But actually, you want to not just open it, you need to download it so that it opens in Word. So you can click on the item, the download button is here. Open up a copy. It will open as a read-only file, so make sure you enable editing on it. So here's what you need to do. Here's a PHP page that tries to connect to a database and then prints out a message saying either it's connected or it isn't connected. However, code's all out of sequence. So each color represents a block of code. So I want you to cut and paste or drag and drop the various colors to a point where you think the file is complete and in the right order. So move it around. You can talk to the person next to you. You can do it on your own, up to you. Sorry? Okay. If you can't connect to your database, then try to connect to, for now, I created one you can share. I'll have a look at it on a break, okay? Yes, there is. It is in kind of like a medium blue color. In the original file, it's right underneath, it's right here in the original file. It's 10 to 9, so we'll take a 10-minute break here. Okay, when we come back, we'll go over this, make sure we got the file in the right order, and then we'll try it out.